I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's November 9th, and we have a lot to talk about. November is National Caregivers Month, and as someone who's spent more than 20 years as a caregiver, I want to acknowledge the work that caregivers perform every day. Today in the United States, more than 50 million caregivers are providing unpaid care for a loved one who's living with a disability or illness. To put a little context around that number, 1 in every 5 Americans is providing unpaid caregiving services, the total value of which is estimated at more than $470 billion. The average family caregiver spends about 24 hours each week providing care, and 10 million caregivers spend more than 40 hours each week providing care. And while that care is unpaid, it comes at a very steep cost. Only about a third of all caregivers are able to work full-time. The lifetime loss in personal earnings for a caregiver is estimated to be more than $300,000. We know that the most common symptoms of MS are fatigue, visual issues, altered sensations, and difficulties with mobility. That means that a great majority of the 2.8 million people living with MS need support at some stage following their diagnosis. And because MS is a long-term progressive disease, MS caregivers take on a responsibility that increases over time and can last for decades. The National MS Society reports that 64% of MS caregivers report feeling emotionally drained, 32% experience depression, and 22% have lost a job due to their caregiving responsibilities. Additional research has shown that long-term family caregivers even face a shortened life expectancy. Beyond providing care for their loved one, MS caregivers often face other difficult realities of life, like managing finances while one or both spouses may be working reduced hours or not working at all, maintaining their own employment obligations, recalibrating their life aspirations, and preserving their own physical health and emotional well-being. Too often, the burden of being an MS caregiver is as invisible as many of the symptoms of the disease itself. So I want to acknowledge every MS caregiver and say to each of you, I see you. And to those of you who are fortunate enough to say to yourselves, I'm doing pretty well. I don't really need a caregiver. Well, I'd suggest that sometimes being a great caregiver simply means providing emotional support on the days or at those moments when your partner needs it the most. Knowing why, when, and how to provide that kind of support, well, that's a special skill all by itself. I'd be remiss if I didn't suggest that National Family Caregivers Month is a great time for you to binge listen to all 8 episodes of my special podcast series, The MS Caregiver Conundrum. In those 8 episodes, you'll meet some amazing MS caregivers, each of whom occupies a slightly different caregiving role. You'll learn about some great resources for MS caregivers. You'll hear some sobering research about caregivers, and we'll even get into all the ways that public policy impacts MS caregivers. You'll find all 8 episodes of the MS Caregiver Conundrum at mscaregiverconundrum.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Now, in the unlikely event that you haven't heard enough of my voice yet, I'd humbly suggest that you visit the CanDo MS website because this month I'm on the other side of the microphone as a guest when Dr. Rosalind Kalb and I talk about my journey as an MS caregiver and the importance of self-care for caregivers. You'll find that podcast at cando-ms.org. Then just click on Resources and click on Podcasts. Today on this podcast, we'll meet a pretty amazing MS caregiver when we meet Monica and Stan Wilson. Monica was diagnosed with MS in 2007, and she and Stan are great examples of how MS impacts families and not just individuals. We'll get an update from Bari Talente, the Executive Vice President of Advocacy and Healthcare Access at the National MS Society, about how some of the things that may be included in the Build Back Better Act will deliver real benefits to people affected by MS. And we'll also get an update on an investigational stem cell therapy from Atara Biotherapeutics known as ATA-188. Some of you who are longtime listeners might remember that we started following ATA-188 3 years ago when we talked with the Chief Medical Officer at Atara, Dr. A.J. Joshi. Since our initial conversation, Dr. Joshi and I have reconnected every year at the ECTRIMS conference to talk about the status of ATA-188. Dr. Joshi is joining us today with an update on ATA-188, and he'll share some news about an unexpected discovery that investigators encountered during their Phase 1 clinical trial. But before we get to all these conversations, there are a few other things that you should know about. If you're living with MS and you're on a disease-modifying therapy, then I don't have to tell you why legislation that could bring some sort of logic and reason to the way prescription drugs are priced is at the top of the wish list for MS activists. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with a legislator at the state or federal level that didn't include a request to rein in runaway prescription drug costs. And while we don't have a new law on the books today, this past week, legislation that will make prescription drugs more affordable has been added to the social infrastructure bill that's pending in Congress, also known as the Build Back Better Act. And beyond making prescription drugs more affordable, the Build Back Better Act also includes a national paid family leave program, and it expands access to quality, affordable health care and home and community-based services. These are all things that can make living with MS better, things that can directly impact your care and your well-being. Joining me to talk about where we are in the constantly shifting legislative battle for the Build Back Better Act is Bari Talente, the Executive Vice President of Advocacy and Healthcare Access at the National MS Society. Welcome back to the podcast, Bari.
Thanks for having me, John. It's always great to join you.
Just to be clear, we're not celebrating any sort of victory today. There's still plenty of heavy lifting ahead of us, but I think it's worthwhile to acknowledge an important moment that MS activists have worked hard to reach.
That's right. And I love how you phrase that, John. So we're not across the finish line yet. People need to stay engaged and keep contacting their members of Congress. But we do have legislative text for the Build Back Better Act coming out of the House. And there's a lot of really good provisions that MS activists have been advocating for a long time. And some of the ones that we're particularly excited about relate to our access to medications work and making sure that people with MS can afford their MS disease-modifying treatments and other medications, and that we're hopefully going to be able to bring prices down a little bit.
Speaking of that, we know that this legislation will allow Medicare to negotiate the prices of certain drugs. Do we know whether that's going to include MS disease-modifying therapies, or is it too early to get all those details yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what is this actually going to look like, and what is it going to mean? So it's certainly early to know the exact medications that will be included. And the legislative text that we're looking at now is much smaller than what was originally proposed last year. But we would look at HHS, the Health and Human Services, being able to negotiate 10 medications in the first year and going up to 20 medications. And they have some parameters that they would have to follow around what those medications would be. And they'd start by developing a much larger list that of medications that meet those parameters. And in looking at what some of those parameters are, that include medications that are moving out of their exclusivity periods, as well as high cost medications, we do think that some of the MS DMTs could be on that list. You know, right now, in looking at where pricing is for MS DMTs, there are a handful of DMTs that have increased more than 30% in price over the last 5 years. And some of those are long past their exclusivity periods as defined by the legislation.
Does granting Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices have any sort of impact on drug prices for people who have private insurance plans?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, part of the reason that the legislation focuses on Medicare is because that's what the federal government pays for. And so that's what they have direct control over through Congress and the government systems. So the negotiation itself probably wouldn't have a direct impact on the private market. There are a couple of other provisions that might. So, for example, one of those provisions is what's referred to as inflationary rebates. And so what that means is for price increases that are above the rate of inflation, the manufacturer would need to give back an additional rebate for prices that go above the inflation. And so again, while that additional rebate is happening within Medicare, certainly I would think that manufacturers would be considering their price increases overall. And so that could impact across the entire ecosystem.
When we hear news about Medicare, it's almost always framed as something that's going to affect seniors because seniors are the great majority of people who are covered by Medicare. But it's not exclusively for seniors. So I'm wondering, when we hear about these changes that will impact Medicare, will that also benefit people with MS who aren't yet seniors, but are already on Medicare as part of their Social Security disability benefit?
That's such a great question, John. And I was actually just highlighting this to a reporter yesterday that I talked to, and the reporter was so focused on seniors, but you're absolutely right. This applies to all people who receive their health coverage through Medicare and the prescription drug benefits there. And so that includes people who are 65 and older who enter Medicare in sort of the traditional age way, as well as people with MS and other chronic conditions that are on Medicare due to their disability status. So any Medicare beneficiary will benefit from these provisions.
Given the fact that this proposed legislation is going to deliver some real benefits to people affected by MS, what can we do to affect what happens next?
Keep contacting members of Congress. Sometimes with Congress, it's a lot of hurry up and wait and then a flurry of activity. And so we don't know the exact dates that the legislation will move. What we think will happen is that we'll have a vote in the House. The legislation will go to the Senate. There'll be some changes in the Senate we're expecting. Hopefully we'll get to a vote in the Senate fairly quickly. And if there are changes, then of course it has to go back to the House for the House to vote, because the House and the Senate have to pass the exact same legislative language. So that means that we're not done yet, and there's still lots of opportunities to weigh in and urge members of Congress to pass the legislation. So we'll keep activating the MS Activist Network and letting you know when those key points in time are for you to email, call, tweet at, whatever it takes to contact your members of Congress and urge them to get this across the finish line.
So as I think you and I have both said, we're not at the finish line in this marathon. Today, we are a step closer to seeing our federal government enact legislation that's going to provide real tangible benefits to people affected by MS. Now, we need you to email, tweet, call your legislators in Congress and tell them that we need their support for the Build Back Better Act. Bari Talente, thanks for everything you and your team do to lead our advocacy efforts, and thanks for talking with me today.
Thanks so much, John. And for everyone out there, remember that the more you can personalize your message to your member of Congress, the better impact it will have. So tell them how these issues affect you personally and why you need them to make the change. And thank you for being MS activists. And thank you, John, for highlighting these issues.
Monica Proctor Wilson was diagnosed with MS on her 40th birthday in 2007. And I was first introduced to Monica when I read a short piece that she had written in the National MS Society's Momentum magazine. The essay was titled The Cost of Caregiving, and it was about the role that her husband Stan played in their relationship. As soon as I had finished reading her essay, I knew that I wanted to meet Monica and Stan, and that's about to happen. Monica, Stan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Hi.
Monica, you're the one who's living with MS, so why don't we begin by having you tell me a little bit about Stan's role?
So Stan is my care partner in this, and he plays a bigger role than he probably knows he does, primarily because he's the financing behind my MS. He's there for support, moral support, emotional support, but without his financial piece, my MS would probably look a lot different than it does right now.
Stan, what do you find is the most challenging aspect of your role as Monica's care partner?
The most challenging, that she may fall herself, just, being fragile with her, saying that like she will break or something, fall or hurt herself,
Monica, in the essay you wrote for Momentum, you wrote that the cost of living with MS goes beyond what insurance will approve. You wrote that caregiving adds up quickly. Tell me about that.
Insurance only covers the basic needs of any person. But with MS, our needs go beyond things that the insurance could even dream of or care about. They probably don't care about it, more so dream about it. But the cost of shoes. Before MS, I wore 4-inch heels all the time. Post MS, not so much. So buying new shoes or shoes that fit your feet, because the bottoms of your feet are like a person reading Braille with their fingers. If your feet are tingling or numbing and they feel something, you need a different pair of shoes. And that could happen any given day. And if you don't have the finances for that, the insurance doesn't care about that. Needs during the pandemic. I wanted to continue physical therapy. Fortunately, I was able to acquire much of the equipment before everyone else panicked and couldn't get equipment. But those costs, the insurance company didn't care if I had an elliptical machine, if I had the bouncing balls, if I had the bands. They just cared that I didn't end up in the hospital, and they have to cover those costs.
So before the pandemic, you'd be able to go to a physical therapy facility that presumably your insurance would at least partially cover. But once the pandemic closed down those kinds of facilities, you were kind of left on your own to figure out what to do and pay for whatever it cost.
Exactly. So the physical therapist could still see me via televisit, but we were limited to bands or stretches and things that I had previously done, but continue to do as maintenance. But if I wanted to continue at my pace and not regress, I needed equipment. I needed other things to keep me going.
Stan, Monica also wrote, and I want to quote from the article now, "A husband should not be worried about choosing between physically being there for his wife's health or losing income that could help his wife's health." Do you worry about having to choose between those two roles, that of physically being there for Monica's health or losing income that could help her?
Yeah, sometimes you're going to have to be with her. So, yeah, you look at possibly losing income, taking off for work, having to choose when you're going to be there. You don't never know when you're going to have to be there. So that's the hard part.
And unfortunately, Stan's job doesn't allow sick care for spouses. And with his job also, if you don't put in a request for leave prior to being approved, you don't get paid for that. So with MS, I never know when that's going to happen. So we would lose income if I had a relapse and he had to be there for me, and he could get written up for being out for so many times. So that would be derogatory against his job. So does he take a hit from being out of work to take care of me, or do I stay in bed all day until he gets home? What do I do?
Well, Monica, you also wrote that the cost of MS goes beyond just finances. It includes things like the time you can't spend with your husband doing simple things like taking a walk in the evening, I believe you wrote. Can you tell me about those? Can you tell me about those non-financial costs of living with MS?
So that's kind of funny because we've learned to deal with a lot of that. But sometimes we like to go, and this is pre-pandemic, of course, but we will go to like an outlet or go somewhere where we could walk for, hours or at the boardwalk. But Stan could walk much longer than I could. So I would either have to sit on a bench and wait for him to come back. And I enjoy doing that. Or he would have to decide, well, we're going to leave now. And that's not fair to him. So I would sit on a bench for a while, regain some composure, some energy, and then meet back up with him. Oh, he was shot without me. So I missed out on that with him. So that's I can never gain those things back. And we have fun just walking around, window shopping for hours. So do I hold him back or do I sit out and let him come back with stories for me?
It's all those little moments that you can overlook, but they're the ones that really create a lot of context for what life is all about. You're exactly right. And Stan, your situation isn't very unique. Unfortunately, it's a common story for family caregivers. What do you think can make a situation like this better? What has to change?
The awareness of the situation, what's going on, and making the moments more enjoyable. The time, you're not going to get that time back. So, and making it priority. So a lot of times instead of doing stuff by yourself, you make it priority to be a part of the MS, be aware and embrace it, and just being a part of it.
Monica, any thoughts on that?
So one of the things that Stan has done very well for me is if we plan to do something or a spare of the moment, he'll say, how is your MS today? Or how's your MS right now? Because it can change at any given moment. So he is very aware that MS can change, but his employer is not aware of that MS can change at any moment. His friends are not aware. So if we were going to a gathering with friends, he would either go by himself or choose to stay with me. And then I feel guilty that he's staying home with me. So go for a short time. So we miss out on things like that sometimes because I'm just having a crummy day, and that's not fair to him. So just awareness, and then friends sometimes don't understand that this can happen because a few hours ago they were speaking to you and everything was fine, and then it's time for the event and you're too tired to enjoy it. Or you're fatigued, not tired, you're fatigued to enjoy it. So awareness, like Stan said, is very important to MS, and not just to our family and friends, but nationally, globally, that MS can affect your family's lifestyle.
I always try to remind people that MS affects families, not just individuals. And you two illustrate exactly how that happens, what it looks like. Monica, what would you say to another couple where one of them was just diagnosed with MS?
Be patient and educate yourself. Listen to your partner. MS, when it hit us 14 years ago, we were actually seeking the diagnosis together. We would go out to, we believed that it was MS. The doctors had not yet said it, but we were going out to events where medical staff would come out and do the dinners, like the MS dinners. And we stalked several doctors for a while trying to get information. And I said, we did it together. So, seek information together so that when the diagnosis is there and the awareness is there, you do it together. As anything, as in a marriage, you do things together. Do this together.
Well, Monica and Stan Wilson, you two are an amazing example of how families can come together in the face of MS and how caregivers find a way to make it all work. I want to thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Every month, CanDo MS offers great programs for people living with MS and their care partners. And this month, all the CanDo MS programs are focused on staying in the holiday spirit. November 10th, there's a coaching program on supporting ourselves and each other. On November 16th, there's a coaching session that's focused on how gratitude can help us every day. And on November 18th, CanDo MS is offering a Jumpstart program that's all about preparing for the holidays. All of the CanDo MS programs are online and available to you at no charge, so you can participate from the comfort and safety of your own home. If you'd like to learn more and sign up for these upcoming workshops and coaching sessions, you can visit cando-ms.org/programs, and you'll find that link in today's show notes. I think one way to stay in the holiday spirit is to feel encouraged by some of the amazing MS research that's taking place. Atara Biotherapeutics Chief Medical Officer Dr. A.J. Joshi joins us in a moment with an update on an investigational stem cell therapy for progressive MS. This is the third ECTRIMS conference where I've had the opportunity to check in with Dr. A.J. Joshi, the Chief Medical Officer for Atara Biotherapeutics. And in each of our previous conversations, Dr. Joshi has given us an update on ATA188, which is Atara Biotherapeutics' investigational cell therapy that's designed to attack B cells in the immune system that have been infected with the Epstein-Barr virus. There are many experts who believe that if you can eliminate the Epstein-Barr virus, you can eliminate most multiple sclerosis. And that's the theory behind ATA188, that attacking the Epstein-Barr virus is a viable path to mitigating MS. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Joshi.
Great to be here, John. Thank you.
ATA188 is described as an off-the-shelf allogeneic T-cell immunotherapy. That's quite a mouthful. So I'm hoping you won't mind explaining what that actually means and how ATA188 is designed to work.
Sure. So as you mentioned, John, I think the theory here behind ATA188 is that Epstein-Barr virus is driving the process that leads to multiple sclerosis. And it does so by actually attacking and invading and infecting B cells. And these B cells then become infected by the Epstein-Barr virus, and then they essentially make their way to the brain over time. And then that's where they start that whole chronic immune cascade that really we believe is the cause of the demyelination that you see in multiple sclerosis. And of course, it's a demyelination, then that leads to all of the symptoms that we all know. Now, what ATA188 does is we're able to actually target very specifically just those B cells that are infected with Epstein-Barr virus. So ATA188 is designed to use T cells, so healthy T cells from healthy donors who already have been exposed to Epstein-Barr virus. Remember, 95% of us have that. And it takes those T cells and we actually create a population of healthy T cells that are able to recognize Epstein-Barr virus. And we're able to actually freeze those T cells. So they're available really pretty much immediately for any patient who needs them. When we use the ATA188 in our studies, we take the ATA188, we administer to a patient. And at that point, the expectation is the T cells that make up ATA188 go and find those EBV-infected B cells and eliminate them. And by eliminating them, you're actually, in theory, taking out the whole engine that's causing the inflammation, that's leading to demyelination, and that's leading to all of the MS symptomatology. So the thought process is what we may be doing here is going after a potential part of the root cause of MS by specifically attacking just those EBV-infected B cells.
This year, you're at ECTRIMS virtually, sharing some really interesting news about ATA188. Can you share that news with us?
Sure. There's two really important pieces to this. One is our clinical data, and that really is focused in on this concept of disability improvement. So remember, in most multiple sclerosis studies, they're trying to show that the therapy that they're using is slowing the worsening of disability. Here, we're actually trying to show that we might even be able to turn the clock back and improve the disability. And in the past times that we've presented data for the program in an open label study, about 24 patient open label study, we've shown that in a group of patients, we are able to actually turn that clock back. Now, granted, this is a phase 1 study, but it is important because we're showing disability improvement that you really don't see in other settings. And it's really not normal for a progressive MS patient to be able to kind of spontaneously see improvement like that. So we're seeing some really promising signs of efficacy there. Now, in the past, we've shown those data that go out to about 12 months. And then we've also shown data that says, going past 12 months out into 18 months. Well, now we're showing data for all patients on our open label extension study that go out to at least 2 years. And in some settings, we have data all the way out to 33 and 39 months. So we've now been following people who've been treated with ATA188 in the study, who've had disability improvement for that long time frame. And what we've seen is once they developed a disability improvement at any point in the study, at every single consecutive time point, they maintained that disability improvement. So on average, we've seen that once you develop disability improvement, you've maintained it for at least 18 months. So a year and a half already, and we're going to continue to follow those patients. Now, there's one person in the study that did have disability improvement and then developed a relapse as part of their treatment course and lost the disability improvement. But every other patient maintained it at every single time point. And now, as I said, on average, they're out to 18 months of full disability improvement. And we're going to continue to follow to see how much longer that keeps going. Another important part of the data are the safety data, right? So we continue to see a really strong safety profile for the program. And, with the additional data and with repeat treatments for patients, we haven't seen any new signals than what we've reported in the past.
Well, that's remarkable. Now, you said there were 2 pieces of news.
Oh, I forgot the second one. Thank you, John. Really important one, actually. One of the questions we've gotten is, if you're seeing this disability improvement, what could actually be behind it? What's really causing the disability improvement? And what we presented now is a special MRI measure. It's called magnetization transfer ratio, MTR for short, and we'll just call it MTR because it's too tough to say the full name. But MTR is a specific MRI approach that in multiple sclerosis is generally connected to myelination or the amount of myelin that you have. So essentially, the way to look at it is if MTR goes down, that means you're losing myelin. If MTR goes up, that means you're gaining myelin. So in our study, we actually said, okay, let's take a look at the people who had disability improvement and compare their MTR to people who didn't have disability improvement. And what we found was that if you had disability improvement, there was actually a significant increase in your MTR. So meaning you had remyelination if you had EDSS improvement. So really for the first time, we're able to show a connection between myelination, so increasing your myelin, to improvement in disability. So now you're coming up with, got it, there's a biological reason why we're having clinical improvement. You get basically HA188 treatment led to remyelination in that setting. And then that remyelination is what was behind the disability improvement. So what's great is, we even achieved statistical significance on one of those parameters in a really small study. So obviously, small study, we need to generate more data in a randomized control setting. But to be able to show those kind of connections to what's causing the disability improvement is really powerful in such a small study at this time point.
Had you anticipated remyelination occurring?
as we were trying to think about why we could be seeing the clinical disability improvement, at that point, yes, we started saying, I wonder if there's remyelination there, because otherwise, how could you have people improving so much? We've had people improving, for example, from, an EDSS score of 5.5 all the way down to 3.0. And what could possibly explain that? So once we saw those results, we did start thinking about that possibility. But I will freely admit, when we first started the program in the earliest of days, that was not even in the thought process. So this is, obviously it's a very, it's really pleasing to see the type of potential effect we may be able to have here. Obviously we want to be measured. We don't want, we know there's more work to be done, but, being able to produce information and data like this, it just keeps adding to our confidence that what we're seeing may really be a true benefit for patients.
Now, you're currently recruiting participants for a randomized placebo-controlled phase 2 trial of ATA188. Who can participate in the trial and how do they get involved?
We're recruiting for anyone who has SPMS or PPMS, so really either one. And specifically in this study, we're trying to focus in on non-active disease. So if you haven't had a flare in the last couple of years, that's what we're really focusing in on. So that way we can make sure that what we're looking at is disability change, right? So really anyone who's had kind of non-active disease for the last couple of years, SPMS, PPMS, males, females, as long as that disease has been non-active for the last couple of years. And again, and you all know that it's really, as long as you haven't had a flare, that's someone who would really potentially be able to participate. The best way to discover how to participate would be to go to clinicaltrials.gov and look up ATA188, and our study will jump right out. Another way to do it would be, you can certainly contact medical information at our company, Atara Bio, and we can also help you connect correctly to the appropriate study centers.
And we'll go ahead and include that information in today's show notes. So again, that's anyone with secondary progressive or primary progressive MS who has not had an active flare for the past 2 years, right?
The people who are potentially eligible for the study, the main requirement is what I mentioned to. There's, of course, other requirements. So there's some additional steps to participate. But the most important one is the one I mentioned about the no flares in the last 2 years. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that.
Great. I wanted to repeat that because, very frankly, people who are living with progressive MS don't often get invited to this kind of a party. And I want to make sure they hear us that not only is this work that just holds so much promise, and it has been so encouraging all along, but it's work that is focused on a treatment, therapy for progressive MS. What are the next steps for Atara Biotherapeutics? What happens next?
In terms of what's next, I think we have an exciting time frame. We're continuing to do a lot of additional work in the back end about the understanding what's happening with ATA188. Obviously, the most important thing for us is the enrolling our phase 2 study. It's called the EMBOLD study. And that's the most important thing, is to enroll the study and try to, to get patients in who are appropriate for it, and then generate those additional randomized controlled data. We're expecting actually to do an interim analysis of the study in the first half of next year. And at that point, we'll actually decide, do we want to expand it even more than we have now? Or do we want to keep it the same size? And so that'll come in the first half of next year, but that's probably the next major important point and time frame for us related to this program.
Well, Dr. A.J. Joshi, once again, thanks for updating us on ATA188. Thanks for talking with me today. I'm already looking forward to next year's update.
My pleasure, John, and thanks for having me.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society. And you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/219. You'll find that link in today's show notes so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or text. And I hope you'll visit the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Real Talk MS app to your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet. It's the easiest way for us to connect. The app will automatically download the latest episode of Real Talk MS. You'll be able to save your favorite episodes, and it's a great way for me to share bonus content with you. So I hope you'll take a moment and download the app today. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.